All right, we're rolling, Pastor Tatlock. Welcome in episode 56 of, I think it's 56, of Vertical Pursuit. Hey, how you doing? It's been a while, I know, because you have been the world traveler that you are. We did talk about your Africa trip, but then since then, we went on a trip out to a ranch in central/eastern Oregon, and then you went to Montana. And the reason why, and a lot of times when we've gone to the ranch, it's been to hunt in the fall, certainly, and I can't wait for that again, to fish. This time was what I want to do here because of Montana and the ranch. You did, coordinated a trip of guys, and then you went to Montana and went to a men's retreat. And so I thought it might be really cool, at least to start this one off, because I always want to hear this stuff, and you and I take the temperature, you more than me, of men, and just kind of get a man update on things you're hearing that are struggles, things that are kind of keeping men down, things that are discouraging them right now, because there's plenty of those. I mean, we both go through them ourselves, of course. But first of all, tell me about, we'll get to the ranch trip in a minute, because you and I were both there for that one, and it was a quick one, but it was basically designed to be a little bit of a wild turkey spring hunt, which we did a little bit of that. I think somebody caught a couple shots off, but we didn't really concentrate on it because it was kind of snowing and it was cold. But the fishing was great, as it always is. And then your Montana trip, but I haven't even heard that much yet about your trip to Montana, where you went to, I know you got a relationship over there now with a church and with a men's group. And they're by the way, listening to the podcast, which is awesome. Yeah. So hi to all you guys in Montana. Love that you're finding enough value and enough that the podcast is giving you that you want to listen to it. And that's why we're doing it, is for groups of guys like that. And of course, as we always say, and don't have to qualify it, it's not just for men, it's also for women. And I have some stories about that, by the way, that I'll get into, as far as my wife has told me. She keeps telling me, like she'll mention a couple of, women in her Bible study who they just love the podcast. And I'm like, okay, wasn't originally our target audience, but great. I mean, I love that. And the comment a lot of them are making is, I kind of know my husband better now after eavesdropping on a conversation by men, for men. It's kind of, and I hate to say it like this, but it's kind of going in the visiting team's locker room and seeing the playbook. But that's not really the right way to look at it. Talk about your Montana trip, though, and then we'll get into the weeds a little bit on what some of the stuff guys are talking about. But this time of year, I know some of your trips over there have been just like rustic and horseback. Oh, your Canada trip certainly was that way. Yeah. But tell me about this trip and what went on.
Yeah, because I told you that there's a church in Montana just south of Missoula in the Bitterroot Valley called Revive Church. So just do a quick shout out to all the guys out there, Stacy, Buck, and the pastors there, great friends. And we've developed just a really, really great relationship over the last several years. And awesome things are happening out there. And so they said, hey, Mike, come on out. We're doing a men's retreat. And it's always fun. It's fun to get out there, hang out with them, see what God's doing. But man, the group of guys that are out there, the guys at this men's retreat were awesome. And as you know, we have a heart for men, and we just see the cultural battles, the spiritual battles, the inner battles that we all face as men. And, you could be here in south of Portland where we're at, or you could go over to some guys hanging out in Montana. And even I was talking with the pastors in Rwanda about their men's conference coming up. And I said, hey, what are the issues you guys got going on here with men? And you know what I hear? Same stuff.
Really?
Whether it's Africa, whether it's Montana, whether it's Oregon, men are struggling with the same things. And that's why I said there's spiritual battle for masculinity, spiritual battle for what it means to be a man. So that is global, and that has been through every generation. And then there's cultural battles, and those differ a little bit. But even in Rwanda, when I was asking, hey, what are you guys struggling with here? They were saying the same stuff. And I could, we did a podcast on that. But what's happened in Rwanda, and I'll bring this back to Montana, in Rwanda, this was a country that, they didn't have cell phones like we did up till just, a handful of years ago. And so they weren't really exposed or exploited with some of the cultural ideology that's attacking masculinity today that we've been going through in the last several decades here in the U.S. But then what happened was in Rwanda, satellites became accessible. And so overnight, you got people out in banana fields that have access to the internet that they didn't have even a few years ago.
It's amazing.
It's crazy. But and that's great. And it's given them great access. They love that. But what the pastors are telling me in Rwanda is now they've got this Western influence, cultural Western influence on masculinity, that the stuff that we battle here is now coming into their country like wildfire. And I mean, you just see everybody with a smartphone, and they're like, hey, and this is all coming in. They're watching the same movies. So Western culture that's been attacking masculinity is now attacking Rwandan culture. And so anyways, I say that only because wherever I go and I speak with men, I hear the same issues. So you got cultural battles, spiritual battles, and then even the inner battles that we face as men, just the battles we face with ourselves and our own flesh and all that kind of stuff. But so Montana
and that shouldn't surprise us, by the way.
No.
I mean, you go back, I mean, look at the Bible. And look at the stuff the men were dealing with there.
Yeah.
So it hasn't changed.
No,
I mean,
it
and
hasn't
we shouldn't
changed.
expect that it's changed or that it's different anyplace else.
Exactly. And I'll talk, I think I'm going to jump into shallow end on something you and I have been talking about for a while. Well, I want to talk about a little bit about the Jezebel spirit. I want to touch on it because you and I we're working on probably a bigger podcast on that. But I only mention it now to let everybody know we'll bring it up.
Yes.
We have a plan on you and I've been talking about that, but I only bring
we may
it up
be in
now.
hiding for about 6 months after we do that one, but we're going to do it because it's being talked about now in the mainstream.
Yep.
And is if all you have to do is, like, as you mentioned, and I don't want to get caught up too much in social media stuff because I do feel like a lot of that stuff is designed to get us battling. And I don't want that, but there are some truths out there that's amazing.
There are truths in it, and I think it's important to talk about. But that comes up when I hear Rwanda, Montana, or even here in Oregon, wherever I go, people are addressing a spirit, and I think that's a conversation that I just had. We were sitting here in my garage last night with a group of guys, and my future son-in-law was here.
How about that? Your daughter's engaged now.
She just got engaged yesterday.
Congratulations.
And, that was that we'll do a podcast on that. But it just her now I can say it officially. Her fiance is a stud. Isaiah is could not be more excited about a future son-in-law. Love that guy, and his dad was here and his buddies, and we were all sitting in the garage last night celebrating their engagement. But the conversation shifted last night. So here we are in our garage, and I'm sitting here with these guys, these young men, and the conversation within 10 minutes went to the battles that men face. And I looked at these guys and said, man, we've got to fight for men these days. And they all just went, oh man, we needed to hear that. And then we just, for the rest of the night, we talked about all kinds of different stuff, from barbecuing. We sat here and what's the best grill? We had all those kind of conversations, but the deep conversations, even last night, even at a engagement party, was like, man, men need to be supported today. And what does that look like? So it's just, no matter where I'm going, these conversations are just happening. I don't even have to they just happen everywhere I go. And I think it's probably what I feel like the conversation I'm having the most. I was with my wife and I lead a young adult small group on Tuesday nights at our church, and one of the guys there, he just got married. So he's in his early 20s, just got married a couple weeks ago, and he said, "Man, we need help as men these days." And he started talking about that, and again, it's just these conversations are just happening left and right all over the place. So anyways, Montana was great. Watch what God is doing in heart. But here's the crazy thing is, men, the theme of the retreat in Montana, I called out there before I went out there. I said, what do you want me to speak on? And I said, what's the theme for the men's retreat? And the theme is stand. And so that verse, that command is all over the Bible. Stand strong, stand firm, stand true, it's all over the place. And there's a couple verses that really hit home on that. And so, man, that was so good to talk about. What does it mean for us as men to stand strong in our faith and our identity, stand strong in what it means to be a man. And when we stand strong, how do we do that? And what are the things that keep us from standing strong?
It's one of my favorites you talked about is 1 Corinthians 16:13 now. It's just be on alert, stand firm in the faith, act like men, be strong.
Yes.
I love that verse.
And that verse is specific to men. And I know they try to they try to water it down, and some translations make it just
they
take it out. But no, that in the original Greek, that verse was speaking to men. Can it be applied to everybody? Of course. But sometimes when we try to apply something to everybody, we miss a direct audience, and the direct audience of that verse was to men. And it says, be alert. Stand. And so we talked about at the men's retreat, I talked about you can't stand strong when you're not alert to what's coming at you. So a lot of men today, they don't understand spiritual warfare, or they don't understand the dynamics. They know they're in a battle. They know that. You feel it. You feel the effects of that.
Because like you said, even last night, when you started talking about men, they're relieved, like, oh, I'm glad you said that. It's almost like it's a taboo subject now that
totally
guys
is.
feel guilty about bringing up.
Yes. Well, it's because we've lived in a culture where for the last several years, to be a man is to be toxic. To be a man is to be evil. To be a man is to be a villain. And that is what our culture does. Our culture has vilified men. And can we bring some examples up where you see guys, men in leadership and power that have abused it? Of course, there's always examples. But what's happening is our culture has taken a few examples and said it's now who men are. And even like, I'll just give an example here in high school in our town, right here in Wilsonville, Oregon. At the beginning of the school year, one of our staff members' freshman daughter was in a class, and it was a leadership class. She was a freshman in high school, signed up for a leadership class. And when she was there, the teacher said, hey, if you're going to be a leader, this is opening week of high school. If you're going to be a leader, you have to be an ally to the LGBT community. And everybody's like, okay, yeah, love everybody. We get that. But this is where it went way further than that. And then the teacher said, if you're going to be a leader and an ally, you have to know what the number one enemy is. And so the teacher went on and said, the enemy is straight white Christian men. Like, it went beyond just, hey, we should love everybody. We should understand everybody. It was, and here's enemy number one. And you're going to see that over and over again and again,
so
straight white Christian.
Hearing that.
And yeah. And so then what happens is you just see it everywhere. And so when men try to talk about it, you're insecure, or, where can I find an audience where these conversations are happening? So, and it's not even just a cultural battle. There is that. We can talk about that all day long, but there's even the battle on the inside for us as men that goes all the way back to the Garden of Eden. When you go all the way back to the Garden of Eden, and Eve was there being tempted, and the impression we get, the way that the language of Genesis chapter 3 goes, was that Adam was present but passive. And it's like, dude, you didn't play your role here. God had given you first. There was an order to the garden. And God, gave them equal empowerment. There was that. They were both equally created in the image of God, given responsibilities. But Adam, you had a responsibility that you left on the side. You were passive, and you didn't take responsibility. And then when something went down, you blamed her. And so again, you didn't take ownership of that. So, that's a battle that, you can look at today and go, are we passive or apathetic as men? In some regards we are, but then you have to unpack that and go, well, why? If that's the case, why? So you asked me a question earlier, like, what am I hearing, the common threads from different men, and there's different things. But when we were on the ranch trip, let's connect that thread. So we got a group of guys together, 7 of us, and why we like doing those trips. You and I've done, I don't know how many of those trips.
A lot.
There's something about the power of retreat, and I feel like men need a retreat, and I don't even know if I like that word. I like the word advance. It's let's get away so that we can come back and advance our purpose and get back on mission and get encouraged and built up. But, sometimes it's getting a group of guys, small group of guys, and say, hey, let's get away for 2 days. Let's get off the grid. Let's go somewhere. Let's go have fun in the outdoors. And some of these guys didn't really even, outdoor stuff wasn't necessarily like their big thing. Some guys were. Some guys were like, hey, this is new to me, but I always wanted to kind of go out and run around out in the wild and, chase around some different animals and just have fun with it. And we did. But the best part of it was the conversations.
Sure, it always is. And it's not just once you're there either. It's a 4.5 hour drive. So you get great conversation there, great conversation back. And then to watch, and then, we were talking to our friend Jim, who was out there with another group of guys after we went. And this was a group of very successful, very big strapping men who probably, by at least the way I envision it, by the world's standard and certainly our country's standard, they don't need God right now. And then he said, inside of an hour in the first night's conversation, 2 or 3 of the guys are crying. They're pouring out their errors, their sin, what they're doing wrong, and how their marriages, when you see a situation like that, and even that was the way when we went, is you'll see, and not everybody immediately likes to dump out and share. I mean, I think, big boys don't cry is something that was kind of beat into us when we were little. So you don't have, men aren't supposed to necessarily, and I don't even want to use the word sensitive. It's not about that. It's about being open and authentic and really letting, sharing what's on your heart and what you're struggling with. And so to hear not only our trip, which we knew was going to happen, but then Jim's story of that trip, these weren't guys, at least on Jim's trip and ours too. But when you kind of think of this, you think of, okay, what does a really broken down man look like? Okay, he's just been through a divorce. There's a big health problem in the family. He's been fired from his job. No, that's not it. Especially in the case of Jim's trip, these are successful guys who you would look at from the outside, driving the Ford Raptor with the boat behind it. Man, that dude's got no worries. Look at that guy. I want to be him. He's got it all figured out. Well, no, he doesn't. Yeah. And I think that's the point in this. And then when you see, even in our trip out there, as the conversation starts, and sometimes it takes 1 or 2 guys to be vulnerable and say where he is erring and say what he's struggling with and start talking about, where's God in my life? How do I find this? And even some guys we've been on trips with, maybe they don't have a strong faith, and we're not saying you have to, but to see them start to discover that, and then after they see a couple of other guys be vulnerable, then the conversation starts going. And some guys talk more than others because maybe they have more questions or they're a better communicator. But and I made this comment in a recent episode when we were talking about men's clubs and a Moose Lodge and all this stuff. Anything that gets conversation going and gets guys together in a case like this, and take your preconceptions and your worldly vision of what the world would label masculinity. I don't care. It's wrong. And if you can get these guys talking, they're better husbands, they're better fathers, they're better friends. So that's the beautiful part of what you're talking about in these excursions or these getaways.
Well, yeah. I mean, you think about, you and I, and so here's kind of where I think, just to encourage guys, is you and I and Jim, we do, it's a cohort, the 3 of us. And we've used that word cohort before, but for people maybe first listening, it's a military word. And it means someone on your left, someone on your right. You're going into battle. And I think that's the significant piece to this common thread, was you have to be in a place where you got at least 1 or 2 other guys that you can be fully known with and be able to take the inner things, the lies you're wrestling with. And I understand, like, that's so hard because guys are like, I don't have that. I get that. It's not like you can just Uber a friend and just like, here we go. At the same time, I think the thing I would tell guys is, man, you're going to have to probably lead it. Like, what you want, you may have to initiate, and that takes risk, and that takes time and prayer and patience. But, I think that starts with just one or two guys say, hey, what if we started meeting every other week? And that's what it was with us.
Yep.
And I bring that back because we sat here Wednesday night, you, Jim, and I, and one of the things we do in that circle is we go, what are the highs, what are the lows?
Mm-hmm.
We do that every time.
Since we met last.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We say, what highs of the week? Since the last time we met. If we 2 weeks, 3 weeks, what's been the highs and lows? And we just kind of go around. And here's the highlights.
And it sounds very simple, but it's not because that can take each guy saying that, it splinters into 97 conversations.
Exactly.
And it goes, and that could be, somebody had talked about on the podcast one time when we had mentioned this, and they said, you guys could do an entire podcast just on highs and lows since the last podcast.
Yeah, right. Totally.
Yeah, that's all you need.
Yeah.
And then you start to realize, and guys, ask yourself this: when's the last time you've been asked that?
Yeah.
And when's the last time you've asked a friend or somebody who's trusted in what you would call a cohort? When's the last time you asked them that? And I don't judge friends this way because I don't try to do that, but there was one guy in particular I was pressing into for a lot, several years, and there are relationships that are a little bit awkward, a little bit dysfunctional, where you tend to be more of the giver and somebody else is the receiver. And one time it wasn't a selfish thing. It was more of identifying a personality and a flaw in a relationship. I thought to myself, when is the last time he asked me, how you doing?
Mm.
And so then it made me more aware because I thought, well, I don't want to be that guy.
Right.
So oftentimes now, with friends or guys I have, I'll just say, and we've talked about this a lot, but just say, how you doing? And then just shut up and let them answer and let there be pauses in the conversation, uncomfortable silence. But anyway, that's the power of that. And I think it's, and guys, by the way, this is a learned quality. This is not, especially for some of you, this doesn't always come naturally.
Yeah.
But you can get there.
Yeah.
And you can work on it and you can practice it. And oftentimes all it takes, as I mentioned a moment ago, is perhaps displaying vulnerability, and then you'll get it back.
Yeah. Oh, and I think that's when we sit there and so this is a little bit of practical, just simple things, like sit with a group of guys like you and Jim and I, and we'll say, hey, what's the highs and lows? Well, the highs this week were this happened. This was great. What's the lows? And it could be anything. And it's different every time. And then we spend the time praying for each other and talking it out, encouraging each other, speaking truth into each other's lives, even challenging each other from time to time to go, you're in a rut, like how you're thinking. And you guys give me advice on stuff. And I'm like, gosh, I needed to hear that. And the advice oftentimes is something either I didn't know, and that's like, oh, fresh perspective, wisdom. Sometimes it's, I already knew it. I needed the courage to execute.
You get license.
And it's just, so it's a simple format. And we typically meet from like 9 to midnight, 3 hours. Every time we do this, we meet at night because we can be available for our families. And then we don't have to worry about it, get home at night late. And so there's ways you can do that. But what's fascinating too is, take Jim, for instance, and I'm going to tie us back to the trip at the ranch that you and
he's coming on the podcast, by the way.
Exactly. And for those of you who don't know Jim, he's a dear friend of ours. And this podcast is kind of an evolution of that fire time.
Absolutely is.
And sitting around a fire and talking at night. And then Jim's like, gosh, you guys just need to.
That's back when it started, when we used to have breakfast all the time.
Exactly.
And then it moved to a night thing.
Yeah. We moved to do an evening thing around the fire, and we didn't have to worry about any
cell phones
hours.
buzzing every 2 seconds.
Well,
and I got a meeting coming up in a couple hours, and nothing wrong with breakfast, but we found it much better to do it when the world's quiet.
Yep. World is quiet. You're not feeling like you're leaving your family because you've already spent the night with them. Kids are already probably going to bed in some people's cases. And you're right. You're not getting a million texts, and you're not trying to make phone calls. You're not thinking the day ahead of you, the days behind you.
And that's probably why, to go back to our ranch trip or the retreat you went to in Montana, it's taking intentional steps to get to a place where the volume of the world is not nearly as loud, and where the deception is faded away. And that's why oftentimes it goes back. I mean, camping or trips, or the whole reason is to get away.
Exactly.
And that's where conversation in these kind of groups can really flourish.
Absolutely. And I heard years ago a quote that said, "The louder the world gets, the quieter you have to get." And we're all living in noise. There's just noise everywhere, things coming at us. And so you take this last Wednesday night, we're doing our cohort time. Jim, we asked him, "What's your high?" And he goes, "I just took a group of guys to the ranch, high profile guys, like you were talking about, successful guys on the outside." And for those who don't know Jim, we'll get into his story another time, but he got caught in a prostitution sting. And here's a guy that's a big, successful hedge fund guy, lots of money, and he'll tell you this. And, you know, he's got the 36,000 acre ranch, the jet, he's got it all, right? Based on the world standards. And then his life blows up. But that was the best thing that could ever happen to him in terms of it saved him. It rescued him. And his relationship with God, even the best part of the story is his wife, Jan, amazing. So we'll save that for the podcast. But the point of it is he goes out on the ranch and gets a group of these guys together, and he asks them this question: what's the biggest failure? Because he shares.
And what have you learned from it?
And what have you learned from that? And guys just, like you said, guys just started opening up and like, wow, here's this, and here's what I'm struggling with. Here's da-da-da-da. And guys start opening up. And he said for his trip, by Sunday morning, man, they were in the Word, and guys were just getting encouraged. And because what the enemy wants to do is he wants to hold our mistakes, our failures in front of us, and he wants to disqualify us. And he's going to use that because the Bible says that Satan's the accuser. He's really good as the prosecutor. And what he does is he puts all of us on the stand every single day. And what he does is he brings evidence and he demands a verdict of guilty, 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 guilty. And what happens with that is for us as men, if we believe those things and our identity becomes wrapped up in those things, we hear the echo throughout the day and it takes us out. It can take us out in many different ways, make us passive. It can make us feel unqualified. Like, oh, I'm not going to step into leadership. I'm not qualified. Or, you know, I did this thing last week and, you know, I'm not worthy. So there's identity stuff, all those sort of lies compounded. But when you and I went out to the same ranch, we took a group of 5 guys, and one of the questions we asked was, what are the biggest lies that you're believing right now? And what every guy said, most of them all agreed, I'm not enough. I'm not enough. I'm not enough. Well, let's unpack that for a second, because as I'm sitting here and guys are go, what do you mean by you're not enough? And guys were saying, you know, what we all think, I'm not a good enough husband. I'm not a good enough father. I'm not a good enough follower of Christ. I'm not a good enough leader, and all those sort of things.
And I don't want to go to one of those retreats because then I'm just reminded of how much I'm failing.
Exactly. But this had the opposite effect, because guys were going, I've been carrying this weight of I'm not enough, the verdict, you know, I'm not enough. And here's all the evidence. But then here's the thing is, I asked everybody, I said, you can only say you're not enough if you have some idea of what enough is. So here's the thing. And I asked,
what are you using for that measuring stick?
What's your measuring stick? And I asked the guys, I said, is that measuring stick internally or externally? Meaning, when you feel you're not enough, is that because the accusation, the voices you're hearing are external, coming from your wife, your boss, a friend, someone in your life that is holding up things in front of you where you feel lousy, you feel like you're failing? Or is it internally that you have some standard of enough that you're not living up to? And so you're hard on yourself. You beat yourself down, and you don't even need the outside voices. And it was both and. You know, there's the outside voices, the inside voices, but the enemy uses all those voices to amplify that we are somehow, you know, horrible people. Now, we all have mistakes. We all want to grow. We all want to learn from that. So there's a place to say, yeah, I don't want to be caught a leader. I don't want to be told, hey, you're great. Yeah, no, I actually have stuff that I need to work on. But I think the space to be encouraged and guys to like walk in the light with that stuff was so good. And I'm just finding men need that right now. So wherever I go, Rwanda, Montana, Oregon, men need a space, just a couple guys or more, to say, man, here's the battles, here's the lies, here's what I'm going through. Speak truth into each other's life, build each other up, challenge, all of those things.
Why do you think that right now it's I'm not enough. I don't have what it takes. And I've talked about that line because of what it meant to me many times years ago when I heard a couple sermons on, do I have what it takes? I think, and I mentioned this, that the time that hit me the most, which it probably does for most guys, is when like you find out you're going to be a father.
Yeah.
That's where that you get smacked across the face in, do I have what it takes?
Yeah.
Why do you think that is so much more a worry, a topic, a struggle today than it's ever been? And I'm sure it's always been that way. And of course it has. We just talked about all the evidence we have of that from from things and guys in Africa sitting out in the field talking about it to guys in biblical times talking about it. But why do you think right now we're hearing that so much more?
I think it's a couple of things. I think one is there's a difference between confidence and arrogance. It's good to have confidence. It's bad to have arrogance. And so you want to, we have a generational curse in our nation where we have men growing up without male role models. And not to blame every dad out there, because we have great dads and we have some of our fathers out there, they didn't have role models. And so again, this is that generational cycle where men didn't know how to raise up men to have those open questions, to talk about things. And, I had a great dad. You had a great dad. We were great fathers. We're grateful for them. And my dad, we would talk about Bible stuff. We would talk about life stuff and world stuff, but not feelings and not the inner kind of struggles and just I was so grateful. Told me all the time, I love you, son. I'm proud of you. So he was very affirming. So I have great respect. I'm grateful, but I don't know that he had. So his dad was in the war. His dad died. Mm-hmm. So he never had a male role model that would do that with him. And he just felt like, man, I got to carry all the responsibilities on his shoulders. And so, I think that there's a cultural thing. It's also generational where men have never had other men model for them what it means to be vulnerable, what it means to be authentic, what it means to be real. And at the same time, in the absence of those role models, there was this ideology out there, this kind of idea that if you're a man and you speak about your weaknesses, you're not really a man. And so we hide those things and we live in secrecy, and then it's embarrassing to come forth and tell another guy that, hey, I have these weaknesses. Like I was just talking with a young guy, I don't know, a little while back, and he was going through a really dark time, thinking through some really, really dark things in his life and feeling, again, I'm not enough. And somebody encouraged him to come talk to me about it. And he's like, well, if I go talk to you about it, I'm admitting I can't even handle that. Mm-hmm. And so there's shame attached to all of this. So we got to root that out. I think at the root, we're all managing shame. In the Bible, when it talked about Adam and Eve, and I think this applies to men too, it says that before there was sin, it said that they were naked. Again, marriage, it was great, but it said, and no shame, naked and no shame. And I think like nakedness doesn't just in that context mean they were physically naked. That when you lay your soul out there, there's a vulnerability, there's if you will, an emotional nakedness, right? But what I love about that in the Bible, it said before sin, it said they were naked and no shame. Now we're afraid of being vulnerable because it comes with shame. I don't want to be known, because if I'm known, what if somebody rejects me? Mm-hmm. What if shame comes with that? So then we manage that fear with facades. We manage that fear with isolation. I don't want to be known, so I'm going to isolate. And then in the isolation, it compounds everything. It works against us. But like, I think for like our relationship, like I can come to you and say, man, here's anything, fully lay it out there. And you're like, yeah, I'm with you. I understand it. Like so that's that level every guy needs to get to in some relationship. You've got to be able to have at least one or two guys that you can say, hey man, here's what I'm wrestling with. Here's my struggles. Bring it into the light. And I'm not saying it's easy, but that's essential.
It seems like too, what's behind so much of this today in this attempt to destroy masculinity and destroy and cloud roles and blur the lines constantly in what is being known as the days of deception that you've talked about a lot. I sometimes I've asked people who I maybe disagree with socially or politically, and I've said, well, after we have a discussion about it, I'll say, what's to be gained by that? What is the point? What is your point in doing that? And many times they don't have an answer. I just think it's like an underlying theme right now, and kind of this thing that we've all come to accept, which I think, again, I think there are forces out there, be it other countries or whatever else, who want conflict, and they know the way to do that is to deceive and to throw as much deception in as they can and get people questioning their roles. Therefore, they're distracted, and they're easier to attack if they're distracted. And I look back at times when, even in recent history, when I love history, and I always look at historical clips, and I mean like in the last century, but I look at times when people appeared to be their healthiest and happiest.
Yeah.
And those were times when roles were clear.
Yes.
And when things were like, I look back recently, even I was watching some post World War II footage the other day, and I don't like war, and it was a struggle and disastrous, and of course a tragedy. But some of those shots of when World War II ended and the soldiers came back home, the pure joy, and it was because they had just come through something very painful and very difficult. But that's when it seems like all of that other stuff had the volume turned down on it, the deception. And there was an assurance and a security in the people, in the looks on their faces, because the roles were clearly defined. Yeah. And call me what you will on that. I am not trying to be some sexist guy saying that. I really am not. But I'm simply exploring my own mind, going, well, when were times great?
Yeah.
And I don't think you'd call now great. Now, in many ways it is, and of course, but in some of those things, and the guys we're talking about, gosh, I wish I lived in those times in many ways.
What's so good about that was, I think that we're living in a day right now where everybody's blurring the lines between genders and roles, and there's a spiritual attack on that, because at the end of the day, and this is the spiritual side of things, God creates man and woman. God creates them, and they both have equal dignity and value and respect. 100% image bearers of God, the Imago Dei, man and women. And so we are equal in many ways, but we are not the same. And God lays out clear, distinct roles for a man, distinct roles for a woman. And when you look at that, today, Satan wants to blur all that, because what he's blurring is not just man and woman and roles. He's blurring how God wants to express himself. Satan wants to distort who God is. And the best way to distort who God is, distort his image bearers. And so there's an attack on masculinity. There's even an attack on femininity, I would say. Sure. In the same way. So I would argue that there's an attack on femininity, and women are being fed lies of what it means to be a woman, and that's as destructive for them and destructive for men. So I wouldn't say there's just an attack on masculinity. There's an attack on femininity. And what does that mean? And women are being forced and pressured to be something that's not who you're supposed to be as a woman. And so all of that is mixed up because Satan wants to distort God at the end of the day. So if he wants to distort the image of God, distort the image bearers of God. So that's the spiritual battle that's going on, and it has been going on for centuries. We're seeing it in our world right now, and we have to unpack that layer. And I think that the Bible speaks to spirits, demons, that carry out and execute these evil plans. So all throughout the Bible, I said it, I was sitting here with a group of guys last night, and we were talking about the demonic and the spiritual warfare that's going on. And behind the scenes,
that's never been more clear than it is right now.
It's extremely clear. I mean, it's okay. So let me just go down this road for a second, because we weren't planning on this, but let me I'll point out some of the demonic spirits that are at work today, and I'll give some stories behind that. But so you take, for instance, take transgenderism and the transgender. It used to be gender dysphoria, and it's something that people understood, and we had compassion, and now it's so normalized and encouraged I was just meeting with a parent this week whose daughter, who's a high schooler, was in a health class, and they were asking them who they all identify as. And she said, I identify as a straight woman. And the teacher said, are you sure? Maybe you should consider, and was actually trying to talk her into,
of course,
identifying in other ways. And so she called her dad and said, I'm not going back here. I don't want to be a part of this. Anyways, I hear more and more of those stories. It doesn't happen in every school, but it's becoming more common. So when you do a study in the Bible and you look at what is the spirit behind these things, in the Old Testament, we've talked about this on other podcasts, there's Ishtar. Ishtar was a Babylonian deity, demon that they worship. One of the ways they would worship Ishtar was they would bring men out, emasculate them, have them dressed as women, and use them as boy toys, dressed as women, in temple prostitution, in worship of these demons. And I mean, it's just completely demonic. Well, you can follow the deity worship of Ishtar into India today, and it's tied to Krishna and some of the deities that they worship in India. And there's actually tribes in India today, transgender tribes that have been around since the time of Ishtar. And so I was meeting with a friend who's a pastor in India that was just recently.
He was fantastic, by the way.
And I asked him, I said, hey, I've studied this. Is this true that in India there are transgender tribes that are used to this day for temple prostitution? He said, yeah, they're all over the place. And he said, in the caste system in India, the upper caste will actually use them in worship to the deities in India. And not only that, but there's a new movie out. This is crazy. I studied this a year ago that I'm like, oh, here's this common thread that goes all the way back to Babylonian culture, transgender worship of demons. And now it's even you can see it in India today, and it's been there for centuries. And so my son's like, hey, Dad, there's a new movie out, and it's called Monkey Man. It's basically the Bollywood version of John Wick. And so I'm like, oh, it's a John Wick-esque type movie, action fighter, and so I'm like, well, we got to watch that. And so it's called Monkey Man, and it takes place in India. And here's this guy who's this kind of, he's trying to work his way through a restaurant, and he gets in fights, and there's this kind of like Fight Club underground mafia and all this sort of stuff. It lays out the plot of the story. Well, he needs to get trained. He needs to get trained so that he has better fighting skills, just like Batman, the story of Batman, how he had to go get trained by, And so in the movie Monkey Man, he gets taken to a transgender tribe, and he learns the fighting of the transgender culture. This is in a movie that's just released to Hollywood.
Wow.
And you see all these transgender men that teach him how to fight. And then he goes back into this fight club. And not only here's the thing, in the movie, when he's in this transgender tribe and they're teaching him how to fight, they're doing it in worship to a deity, Indian deities. And that as they do that, he then gets the power of these deities so that he can go fight supernaturally. I'm watching this movie 2 weeks ago in my living room, and I'm like, wow, this is in Hollywood now.
Was it a mainstream?
Mainstream movie in Hollywood just came out. And I'm watching this going, and how you watch it and you're like, oh man, this is so making now in this movie, the heroes are the super fighting transgender. It's just the craziest thing. My whole point is there's so many different ways that culture will try to normalize that. Well, behind all this normalizing is a spiritual battle. There's spiritual warfare. And I'm just using that as one example.
Sure.
People get caught up because you asked earlier, what are the cultural battles? And I'm like, behind these things. So I'll give you another spiritual battle. Mammon is a spirit of money. How many men right now, your identity is how much money you make?
Absolutely.
So as much as I could talk about the spirits behind the transgender movement, I'll talk about the spirit behind money. And Jesus talked about it. And so if I'm caught up as a man, that I got to have my identity in my wealth status, I got to have my security in my wealth status, I'm falling prey into another spiritual battle that there's forces of evil that are influencing me in this culture to be successful, to have materialism, all of that. That's as much a spiritual battle. My son last night, this is crazy. My son, because him and I talk about these things, and we were talking about abortion and pro-life and the debate that's going on, and how here in Portland, one of the largest abortion clinics is the Lilith Center. Well, in the Old Testament, Lilith was
the
a demon
and the killer of infants.
Exactly. In the Old Testament, Lilith was a demon that killed children by night, and so it's no wonder that
You're going to name your clinic
the Lilith Center. And my son goes, Dad, Diablo, because my son likes to play games, and he goes, Dad, I noticed last year Diablo, the newest version of Diablo, the video game.
I don't know that one.
It's a video game, and he said, my son said this. He's like, Dad, last year when the new version came out of Diablo, he said, guess who the demon that we're all fighting was? Lilith.
No kidding.
But he said this. My son said this. He said, but the way the video game is that it kind of wants you to like Lilith because she's a good demon. And in modern feminism today, third wave feminism, you'll hear this. I read articles all the time on modern feminism. Women are told to channel their inner Lilith.
Well, what was that concert tour? Not that long, the Lilith Fair.
Exactly.
And it was all female performers, and it toured the country, and it was kind of like this well-known festival that you'd go. And I didn't know what it meant then.
Yeah.
And then now, as I've looked into it, and then through you had kind of told me, so I did my own research on it. Now you look at it and go, my gosh.
Yes. And that's why we'll do another podcast on the Jezebel spirit. But this is where this all ties in. Is Jezebel was a real woman in the Old Testament. Ahab was the king. She was known as the most wicked queen. And people go, Mike, there's no Jezebel spirit. That was just a woman in the Old Testament. Read the book of Revelation. In the book of Revelation, Jesus speaks to the 7 churches and says to them, you tolerated that Jezebel spirit. And he's speaking to churches today. And we'll unpack more, but there's a Jezebel spirit. And what does that look like? And how does that in battles? The Jezebel spirit is very much tied to the feminist movement, but even just women finding their identity in seduction and seducing, and women using seduction for power and gain. If I'm a woman and I'm using seduction to gain a position of influence, power, or anything in this world, that's part of the Jezebel spirit. So the Jezebel spirit wants to emasculate men, wants to control men, wants to overpower men. And so that's at work in our culture. So there's all these behind the scenes spiritual things that are taking place. And I think we have to be more discerning on those things.
I was looking this up as you're talking. I was just kind of looking up Lilith. Is this pop culture? This says wife of Lucifer, queen of hell, and mother of Charlie. Yeah, and I don't know. I'm not that. I guess I have not looked at that as much. But
yeah, there's the Old Testament Lilith. And how the Hebrew people.
I'm just wondering how much is mythology and how much is.
It's in the Bible, and it was a real demon that was worshipped, or a real demon that was acknowledged in the Old Testament. And then, of course, what culture does is they put their own spin on it, And so you see today some added things attached to the persona of Lilith, but you see it, and it's intentional. And there's a spirit at work behind those things. I think another spirit that is at work is a spirit where we have unforgiveness.
For sure.
And so I had a conversation with a young man just 2 nights ago, and I said, what are you struggling with? Because he's been struggling with some stuff. So what are you struggling with? He goes, trauma. And I said, what's your trauma? And he goes, my dad abused me. And I said, well, tell me about that. And he said, yeah, my dad used to, when I was a boy, he would hang me upside down and beat me, hold me by the ankles, hold me upside down and beat me. And then he said, when I got a little bit older, he goes, I remember my dad leaving, saying, I'm leaving you. I'm going to have nothing to do with you and your mom. And he says, I have this picture of my mom in the driveway on her knees yelling, don't leave us, as he drives away. So here's a young man who had an abusive dad and then an abandoning dad. And so him and I just had to really unpack and start to unpack like the lies that this poor young man believes about himself is so rooted to something like that, right? So those are real lies. He feels unworthy, he feels angry, he feels abandoned. And so when you talk about a father in heaven that loves us, it's like, well, my picture of a father sucked. It was horrible. So
got to unwind some of that.
Yeah. And Satan wants to then really press into those lies, you're not worthy, right? So if you have an abandoned father, an absentee father, instantly inside you're going to go, well, God abandoned me. Am I not lovable? Am I?
So therefore, I'm just not going to think about those thoughts.
Exactly.
I'm just going to stay surface. And I have friends like that who I can tell, and I know that they're friends, but I know they don't have two other friends to rub together. I mean, it's just like, and the reason is because they don't want to be known.
Exactly. And I think that's I wish I could say just meeting with guys is going to solve all your problems, but it's a powerful stepping stone to say, who can I find? And you know what? Maybe you have to lead it. I think sometimes we want it to all come towards us, but maybe you have to initiate that and find one or two guys and say, hey, can we meet? Can we find a place and just simply go, what's your highs and lows? Let's just start with that.
Sure.
Get in the word together, speak truth over each other, speak God's identity over each other, replace those lies with truth. And it's that spiritual warfare. That's battle. You battle together with truth. You battle together with community. You battle together with brotherhood. And that, we opened this whole segment by talking about the idea, how do we stand as men? We stand as men together.
Do you think there's anything to, and I was thinking about this a minute ago, I was thinking about it the other night, but then when we were talking in our cohort, but then I was thinking about when I was just mentioning, and perhaps it's because most of the media coverage of post-World War II was this joyous experience. Is some of this because has the ease of life now made people soft, and then as our minds kind of corrupt enough to where there is so much free time in our mind to go places where if we were just busier and maybe battling, it wouldn't be. I mean, I think back to this quote that I've tried to use before, but have usually chopped up. Tough times create strong men. Strong men create easy times. Easy times create weak men. Weak men create tough times.
Yeah.
I know that's a lot of people have heard that before, but I've heard it mentioned about the current day we're in now.
Yeah.
Is that the easy times?
Yeah.
And I've heard people even say, who was I hearing? I was hearing Jerry Seinfeld talk about this, by the way, the other day. He was talking about where a lot of this money, this love of money started. And he said, really, the 1980s were the first time, and there's something to this because I was a kid of the 80s and a little bit of the 70s. But the 80s were really the first time that men of probably, and no offense, of probably not great, massive skill could make a lot of money really quickly.
Yeah.
And it seems like, and he was arguing and saying, which oddly enough, it was Jerry, but he was very smart with this stuff, saying that our culture is still battling that. And up until that point, like I remember the 70s, I was born in 68, and I remember the 70s, nobody cared how much money you made. And it wasn't that, you had some cool stuff, but everybody was pretty, I think about my town, and even the people that were like like doctors in your town, their house kind of looked like ours. It wasn't, there wasn't really any difference. And so then I'm only saying that to say, where of course the money is the distraction, and I don't mean to get away from me talking about tough times, but I feel like we were still on the end of a culture to where maybe it turned the volume down on some of that because of the struggle that we had faced, and because, and I want to read one more quote in a second that I think plays to this whole thought of how the ease of times creates a secondarily more difficult time because of the soft men it creates. That make any sense?
Oh yeah, no, it totally does. I think the idea of men being soft today, there's a comparison. So when you say you're soft, well, compared to what? And I think that what comes to my mind, the conversations I've had, is the idea of, have we coddled men? We've created a coddling culture. Well, a culture that is driven by comfort, driven by instant gratification, a culture that's driven by the consumer, it inevitably is going to lead to a place where you have created a monster, and the monster is not a beast. It's you've created a complacent, comfortable, coddled man.
Which is why people like you and I and the other guys that we have introduced, like the ranch or the wilderness to, they go up there and just go, oh my gosh. It's because it's wired into us to want that.
Absolutely.
And you sense, now for us, it's a vacation. So it's maybe we'd be different if we were having to literally hunt for our food.
Yeah.
But you can sense when you're out there or when you go do something like this, when you go, and we've talked about this before, but remembering only times where maybe we felt like our lives were at risk, or it was something really difficult, or we got hurt. Those, and then you sense the instinctive connection in our human nature with kind of you kind of like that, and how it feels good, and in a weird way, but for me it does. Absolutely. And because I don't want to be this soft guy, and so then we seek out adventure. And then I know we can call it adrenaline junkies, but I think there's a deeper need there with people who seek that stuff, and I kind of admire it.
I think that we are wired for challenge.
Yeah, man.
Challenge, and this is where competition comes from. And not every masculinity has to be sports. That's not what I'm saying, but competition is in every form. You can be competition in the struggle to overcome something, the challenge, adversity. That's a part of the way that God has wired us, is to overcome adversity. And so I think when we grow up I just saw, this is hilarious. There's a video that's going virtual right now. It's going viral. This video is of a dad. He's standing, and his son, his boy is probably like 12, is outside a window. And the dad's punishing the boy by saying, go out and play. That's the punishment.
Yeah,
He's disciplining his son, saying, go out and play. And the son is standing at the door going, let me in. I don't know what to do out here. The kid's standing in the front yard.
That makes so
and the dad goes, go climb a tree. Go ring a doorbell and run. The dad is telling him, like, go do these things. And this is the discipline.
I know.
And that's why it's so ironic. And the son's like, I don't know what to do out here. Let me back in. He goes, no, go run around. He's not even punishing him, but it's punishment, because the idea of going out and doing something adventurous, being outside. And I think that there's a handful, it's not just one thing that we've created to coddle. There's a saying, it says it this way, that if you comfort a child, raising up children, if you comfort them, and you do that without really encouraging, like if you comfort a kid, but all you do is comfort them and you don't challenge them, okay? You're coddling.
Yeah.
Comfort without challenge is coddling. If you challenge them without comfort, it can be crushing. And so I think it's like, how do we find that balance between challenge but here's the other thing too, when it comes to gender roles, it's fascinating. I heard a leader recently say this, is that everybody wants equality. Everybody wants equality. It's all same, all those sort of things. When it comes to the roles, a man and woman can be the same, until something happens, and then a man will be held accountable to being a man, and a woman will be held accountable to be a woman. For instance, there's a woman that's walking down the street, or a child's walking down the street, and a house is on fire, and that child's in danger, goes into the burning house, and you see it, and you're a man, and you do nothing. You're going to be judged that you were not courageous, that you didn't lay your life down. Everybody says, no, until, no, we really do expect you to be a man. And the same thing of women, too. If a woman is not nurturing at home, and everybody's like, well, she doesn't need to be, she can be strong, and she can be this, just like a man, and yet people will hold her accountable and say, you should have been more nurturing at home. So everybody wants sameness, but actually we're not held accountable to sameness. We're going to be held accountable to distinct roles. And one of the roles for us as men is to get in touch with what does it mean to face adversity, to not be coddled. And that starts at a young age. And I think that we have coddled. So we have a generation of men where everything's being done. Everything's being delivered to your door. You don't actually have to go out and figure things out. You don't have to sweat. You don't have to face rejection, like in healthy ways. I didn't make the sports team. When every kid gets a ribbon,
right?
And when every parent says, "How come my kid didn't make the team?" every kid's told they're the American Idol,
Right.
when no, they suck. Your kid can't sing. They can't, that's not them. It's creating delusional stuff. But what you've actually done in trying to build their self-esteem, you've not actually helped them build a strong self-esteem. You've made them weak in their identity. You've made them not resilient. Anyways, that's some.
Well, so on that note, I love Jordan Peterson, and he was going off on a riff the other day, so these are his words, but he's talked about this a lot, what we're talking about right now. So these are his words. Find something difficult to do. You need that. You're not built for comfort or pleasure. If that comes along, great. If you have a day where you get that and things come and give pleasure and have some sense and enjoy it. But don't be thinking that that's what your life is aimed at. If you orient yourself in the hedonistic direction, there's nothing in it but shame. No one is proud of themselves for using pornography. You've got the right to do it for sure, but it doesn't work and you know it, so don't sell yourself out. The adventure in your life will be found in responsibility. And he talks about the fact that we haven't told people that, young people that in a long time. You pick up your cross and you shoulder it uphill because that's where the meaning in your life will be derived from. It's in the difficulty. It's in the responsibility. It's not in the hedonistic or self-gratification. If people just get what they want all the time, immediately, it's not like that enables their character. Your character is made noble by sacrifice, by the delay of gratification.
Wow.
And that's all associated with maturity. So I love that. And I know oftentimes Jordan can be extreme with stuff that he said. I love it. I think this one, and we haven't taught that for years, but your character is made noble by sacrifice and by the delay of gratification. Try to sell that today to young people.
Exactly. Everything's about instant gratification, not delay of gratification.
Correct.
And you and I talked about this on a podcast, one of our last podcasts, and I spoke at the men's retreat in Montana. I talked about the word malakos, which is the word effeminate in the New Testament. And it means a man who cannot control. It's a weak man is a man who cannot control his urges. So in a culture that says feed the urges, instant gratification, I think being a man is growing in the delayed gratification, being in control of that. And it's a fruit of the Spirit, which is self-control.
Yeah.
So a Spirit-filled man, one of the fruits of that is self-control, not self-gratification.
And the Bible says deny yourself.
Exactly.
And that's what that's all about.
And that's what that's all about. So the true measure of a man is a man that can sacrifice, deny himself. But that's hard in a world that says indulge in cravings at your fingertip, push a button, delivered to your door. You know, pornography is one of the, I would say.
And that's why he says pornography.
That's why he said that. And because it's one of the most self-gratifying things. The word malakos, which is some translated homosexual in some Bibles, I don't think it does it justice because it's a bigger word than just that. It could actually mean a dude that's jacking off to porn.
Right.
And he's not homosexual. It's the root of it is you're not in control of your urges.
Right.
Yeah. So
well, it's interesting, and I know we went all over on this, but I kind of wanted to get kind of a man update on what we're hearing and what we're seeing, and there's a common theme here in all of it. And I know some of these things we've expressed in this podcast have not been, they've been things we've talked about before, but I think even we're given affirmation and assurance when we continue to hear them, because oftentimes we talk about things we think are going on or problems we think are happening, and then we go out and kind of get a weekend with a bunch of guys and you get refreshed and you get the idea that we're exactly on the right track because they're all struggling with this stuff.
Absolutely. And I think that's where, again, coming back to that circle of guys in your life, that you can, again, challenge that we don't coddle. We don't coddle in our relationships. We encourage. We are there. There's tears that need to be shed, 100%. In fact, why we're sitting here on this podcast, one of the guys, shout out to Mark, one of the guys that was at that retreat that we just did
Montana?
at the Antone.
Oh, Antone, yeah.
Yep, that we just did last week. He didn't know we were in podcasting right now. He had no idea. He literally just sent me a text a couple minutes ago. This is what he says. Hey, thinking of you, praying for you this morning. Hope your week is going well. Now, it's the simple things like that.
Yep.
to have some guys where you can just say, hey man, how you doing? Thinking about you, praying for you. And that right there, keeping men standing strong, facing the cultural battles, facing the inner battles, facing, we're not coddling each other. We're challenging each other, helping each other overcome, be victorious. We do that together.
I'm so fortunate in that I have so many guys like that. Guys that I send that to, that when they cross my mind, and here's one of the nice parts about technology. I love doing that, and I love getting those texts. How you doing? I'll get some of those, and then my reaction is, why have I acted like I'm not doing well? But then I realize they're not saying that; they're just checking in. And then I have another friend who always texts and just says, "How can I pray for you today?" Just simple texts. And I'm so lucky that I have those guys in my life. I mean, I just encourage you, if you don't, they're there for you. And then be that for somebody else. That's what starts it.
And one thing that I'll add before we wrap up, because I think it's the balance of challenge and encouragement. How does that, because that's equally important. Because as I talked earlier about the young guy I met with recently that had trauma from his dad, that's real trauma. That's real trauma. At the same time, I think people overuse the word trauma today. And I don't want to dismiss anybody that has real trauma, but I think we were talking about this recently, that trauma is now a trend. It's trending. And so
trauma's been redefined.
It is. And the reason where I'm going with that is we live in a victimhood culture.
Oh, sure.
And so identity's in victimhood, identity's in being the victim. And
I got offended.
Exactly. And so that creates weak men again, is if I always play the victim, things aren't going my way. This isn't easy. And I'll be honest, I'll just be honest with this. I've done a lot of work in prisons with a lot of inmates over the years. And I've worked with a lot of homeless guys. And I love that. I love working with homeless guys. But here's the common theme I've seen. They always blame somebody else. I'm the victim. I'm the victim. I'm in jail because of somebody else. I'm on the street because of somebody else. Are there cases? Of course. The common denominator that I see is that the more that we own a victim mentality, woe is me, poor is me, everybody's against me. So are there times where that's true? Yes. So I think we have to be careful when we're encouraging each other. We also don't want to validate too much that, oh yeah, you're a victim. It's like sometimes a buddy needs to look at a buddy and go, yeah, hey, don't be the victim right now.
Yeah.
Part of overcoming is overcoming victimhood.
Mm-hmm.
And that can look like 1,000 different things, but
that's part of holding each other accountable.
It is. Yeah. It's not just sitting there, because I think that's a coddling thing that parents have done with kids. And I think we don't want to do that from men to each other, because I've seen a kid comes home, they didn't make the sports team, and you're like, oh, you're the victim. Mom calls the phone.
You still got a trophy.
Dad calls the coach. And the kid's hearing what's that?
I said, oddly enough, he's still got a trophy.
Exactly. Hey, look at all the trophies I got. Wow. Why do they all say 7th place? But it's true. And you see, and what happens is the parent gets on the phone with the kid sitting there reaming out the coach. Wow, Johnny didn't make the team because he's the best. No, Johnny's not the best. And Johnny needs to work at getting the best. And like Johnny needs to use this as momentum and fervor to go work harder so he can make the team next year, and it'll make him better. But what you just did is you just affirmed and you enabled his victimhood. So I want to get to a place in our relationships and talking to men that how do we encourage, yes, build you up. Dude, that sucks, man. That's hard. Man, I believe in you. But also on the other side is I'm not going to let you stay a victim. I'm not going to enable the victimhood, because what happens with victimhood is we turn to coping.
Mm-hmm.
And so because what happens in victimhood, it becomes justification for things to make us feel good. And I talk with men all the time about even porn, and I'm like, what is the trigger for you? It's different for a lot of guys, but some guys, it's victimhood that becomes the trigger, the justification. Yeah. So that's the challenge, is how do we encourage but not coddle?
Or a lot of topics. The wussification of society is a big one.
Yeah.
And I hate it. I remember, lastly, I know we've been saying we're going to close for a while, but I played 3 sports all the way through, like a lot of kids in my day did. I remember a lot of things. My dad was a coach. He was the high school basketball coach. But the one season I remember the most is when I'm just kind of reminiscing about athletic days and high school athletic days was my freshman year of football. We didn't win a single game. And we didn't get trophies, and we got our butts chewed all the time. And I remember after our last game, I think we were 0-10 or something like that. And I don't know why we sucked so bad, but we just did. The coach sang this military song on the way home on the bus, and it was just kind of like we were chanting after him. It was kind of a mockery, it was fun, but he was having fun, and I remember that. I think I did because it was painful. We were doubting ourselves. We stunk. We knew it, and we weren't getting a whole bunch of affirmation until one moment when our hard-ass coach, who was a great guy, kind of had some fun with us after the last game, knowing, and I even at that age, I know I'm sensing he thinks we feel like crap, which we probably did. But my point is, we didn't win. We didn't have to tie. We lost, and we lost them all. And you know what? We survived. And I'd like to think that season probably helped me grow more as a human being than any other season. If we had won them all, I don't think I would have had the development that I did of losing them all. So let your kid lose is my point. A little bit. I know it sucks because I'm a dad too, and I want to see that they win everything and have all these successes. But boy, we've lost some of the difficulty and having things be difficult, and that's just the way it is. And I feel like it's affected us. It's affected us as people. It's affected us as men. All right. I guess we'll stop there. There's a whole other branches we could go off on, but we do appreciate you. Mike mentioned some guys in Montana listen. We just appreciate you so much. And I run into people all the time in my little world who talk about a topic that came up on the podcast and suggestions for other topics, things that are moving them, things that are challenging them right now. Just know that we love and appreciate the fact that you give us the time you do, if you do, to listen to the podcast. And then your comments are gold. We appreciate them. So thanks for being a part of the Vertical Pursuit family, and we will see you on our next episode. We invite you to subscribe to our podcast, comment, or message us, and check out our website at verticalpursuit.org. Download the VP app and check us out on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook.